Hi, hello everyone. My name is Colin Campbell and I'm the editor of JAR, and I'm super thrilled to have you all here today for a webinar on how to be a better and more efficient reviewer. I'm even more excited to be joined by Altaf Merchant and Jean-Luc Herman as well, two of our experienced AEs to help with this discussion and provide their insights on what makes a great reviewer and also how we can be more efficient as reviewers as well too. So I'm super delighted because Jean-Luc Herman is a full professor of marketing and he's head of the Surfage Research Center at the University of Lorraine, France. And we have Altaf Merchant as well too. He's a professor of marketing and the Gary E. and James A. Milgard Endowed Dean of the Milgard School of Business at the University of Washington, Tacoma. So super excited to have two super experienced associate editors help out and provide their thoughts and expertise on reviewing and what we can do to basically be better and more efficient reviewers. Throughout this webinar, please feel free to provide any questions or comments or thoughts you have as we go through and discuss these different topics. It's a pretty casual format today, and we've got some different areas and questions we want to touch on, but we definitely want to make sure this is useful to you. So if you've got questions or topics or areas you'd like us to talk about or have thoughts you want to hear from us on different topics, please throw those in the Q&A panel and we'd be more than happy to address those. So first off, I wanted to start off just sort of talking about what the different rules are that different people have when a paper comes into a journal. This is just kind of a quick sort of recap of what different players do in this space. So when a journal receives a paper, it'll first typically go through some sort of editorial assistant who's going to go through and check that it has the right formatting and things like that. And then it will get passed on to the editor. So in this case, for JAR, it'll come to me. What I'm looking for when I see a paper come through is, number one, is it a good fit with what our aims and scopes are as a journal, right? So is it something that's addressing, a topic that's relevant to advertising in some way and also relevant to practice, right? Those are the two things we care about, right? Is it, on the right topic for advertising, and is it something that's going to be relevant to practice, and does it advance theory? I'm also looking to see, is it done in a way that's strong enough to be likely to be successful at JAR? It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want it to have a strong enough chance to basically survive review. The reason I care about that is I don't want to go through and have a paper basically take time and effort from AEs and also reviewers if there's not a very strong chance it's going to actually be successful. Assuming it is on advertising and assuming it has some potential contribution to theory and also practice, and it is of sufficient quality, then I would pass it on to an associate editor, one that ideally has expertise or some in that topic or related topic, and have them take a look at it and provide an assessment. And I'd love to open it up to both Jean-Luc and Altaf for their thoughts on what they're looking at when they get a paper that comes through to them as an associate editor.
So can I go first, Jean-Luc, or would you prefer to? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Colin and JAR and ARF for hosting this wonderful webinar. I think it's very helpful to share and I hope to get some exciting questions from the audience as well. So what am I looking out for when I receive a paper, right? So the first thing I really look at is what is really the topic, and therefore the abstract becomes important in terms of, is this contemporary? Is this current? Is it a topic which our readers, especially in JAR, we have an academic base and we also have a practitioner base. So will our reader base really be interested in it? Then, of course, I'll go through the paper and see, which particular category does it fit in terms of within advertising. There's media, and then there is creative development and strategy, and so on and so forth. So, and I look at it from a perspective that, do I feel that, as Colin rightly said, what he does at a high level as editor-in-chief, I look at, is this paper developed enough that if you give an opportunity to the authors for making changes, that it can really move ahead? Because the main thing in a manuscript is really the contribution, right? What is the contribution, or what is not the contribution, right? So if I feel that there is something there, right? And they may be okay, the contribution seems to be there, but maybe the method need to be tightened, or maybe some additional work needs to happen. I feel there is some potential, then we send it out for review. And I mean, our reviewer selection also we usually send it out to at least 2 or 3 academic reviewers and maybe 1 or 2 practitioner reviewers. And what we're looking out for among both is very different. And I won't get into that because I know Colin will explore that topic in a little while. So that's what we're really looking at. Unless the manuscript is really very weak and looks more like a master's thesis, which is at a very nascent stage, we usually send it out for review, because review has multiple purposes. One is, of course, to make the manuscript go forward in the system, but also give feedback so that scholars become more refined in the work that they do.
Yeah, maybe just to add a bit very quickly, because I fully share what has being said by Altaf and Colin. I would just add maybe that I usually have also look at the storyline, looking for a coherent storyline, because the paper needs to tell a story, and either the abstract and the introduction is taking you to the story, transporting you into the story, I would say. Either it's not, and if it's not, then usually it means that you cannot see exactly where the authors want to bring you, and usually there are some either issues or main concerns into the different sections, and then it's more difficult to deal with.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah. All right, so paper comes in, it makes it through the editor, it goes to an AE, they send it out for review. What about reviewers? What is the role then that reviewers play in this process?
I think reviewers play the most important role. I
agree. Yeah.
As editors, we are broad gatekeepers, but they are the ones who are the shepherds who take the manuscript through. So reviewers plays a lot of different roles. As I said, the first role that they play is to really give feedback. All right, and I've seen that happen in different ways. There's some reviewers who take it upon themselves to be very constructive and positive and gives tough and hard feedback. It's not about not giving tough feedback. Give tough feedback but in a very constructive way. And I think that is very helpful, because reviewers are your peers. They help you strengthen the manuscript. I mean, I've published over 50 papers as an author myself, and reviewed and shepherded God knows how many manuscripts for several journals. I really feel that the paper becomes stronger, becomes more evolved, the contribution becomes more distinct as the paper goes through the reviewer process. Now, that does not mean all reviewers do that kind of a constructive role, and different in my mental frame, the different categories you can group reviewers into. And I don't know if, Colin, you want me to talk about that now, or do you want me to save that gunpowder for
Feel
later?
free. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the different categories of reviewers in my mind. Okay. One are those constructive, I would say, colleagues, and in many ways mentors to the authors, which really build the paper. And then we have those who take it upon themselves to crucify or destroy the paper, right? Look at everything that's wrong, right? And really have no hope. And then there are those who are diplomats, who present their ideas in a very diplomatic way, but very difficult for the authors to actually absorb what they're trying to say and what they want, right? And then you have those reviewers who are really not interested. Because of time. I know we as academics, we have so many things to do. We have classes to teach, a lot of research. We juggle administrative roles, service roles. So their feedback is very skeletal, and that becomes very difficult for AEs and the editor to figure out what to do and what exactly is the assets or weaknesses of the manuscript. So in my opinion, reviewers play a seminal role. And I think that role goes back to the philosophy of what we do as academics, enhancing knowledge, right? I think enhancing our knowledge is important, but helping our peers enhance their knowledge and actually then enhance the state of knowledge of the area that we are working in, which is advertising, marketing, and communications, is all our responsibility together. It's a collective responsibility. So I think that being said, reviewing is, I would say, is a good thing to do from another angle as well. You know, I've learned a lot from listening to scholars speak. I've learned a lot by seeing other scholars and reading other good work. But I've learned a lot, and this is the feedback I get from my doctoral students, that they learn a lot by reviewing, because they see how others think, they see how others work, and when you go through someone else's paper, you may reflect on your own manuscript, right? So it's important for seasoned academics. It's important for mid-career academics. It's also important for doctoral students and early career academics.
No, I totally agree. I think it's a great way to, stay current on methods and topics, get different perspectives. And I also personally always love at the end, after reviewing something, to see what the other reviewers have said as well too, and sort of check myself and see, what I overlap on, what I'm not, what I missed as well too. It's a great way to kind of learn as well.
Yep.
Yeah, just to add a couple of ideas, I think it's a very costing job to review papers in a right way, but it's a very, as you said just before, an enriching job, because you are not only seeing how other works, you are not only reading papers, you are doing and writing the review. So by doing it in a way, by writing it, you need to justify what you are telling. You need to justify why you are telling that. And later you are going to see the other reviews. So they did the same job as you. They had exactly the same material as you had. And of course, that's a very enriching process. Costing, very costing if you are doing it in the right way, sure. But as usually, yeah, a lot of efforts, a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
But it's a very important job, and I would say that it's something. In fact, we cannot, as AEs, we cannot work without the help of the reviewers. We cannot have also. We do not have any contradictory opinions if we do not have the work of the reviewers, and then. And it's very helpful to have a clear review. And what is a clear review? I would say a review helping us to see the value of the contribution, and helping also to evaluate if it's possible to make from the MS we now have a publishable paper for the journal. And of course, without forgetting that needs to be done with reasonable, I would say, achievable efforts and costs also. That's an important part, I think. When Altaf was talking about before, about some reviewers who sometimes are crucifying everything or asking for another paper. That's the point. Of course, I think each of us can read a paper and then say, oh yes, an interesting idea, but here how it should have been done. But that's not the role of the reviewer, to say how it should have been done. Of course, each of us would do it in a different way. And nobody of us has got the right way to do it, or cannot be sure to have the right way to do it. So it's necessary probably to be a bit open and to to adopt a perspective, to read the paper in a way, to evaluate the contribution, and trying to say how it's possible for with the existing MS to bring it to a publishable paper that is going to how would I say, to share in the best way the contributions of that paper for readers. So that's probably the more difficult thing to do, and to be careful, of course, not to say, oh, here it should have been done in another way, here too, here too, here too. At the end, you're asking for another paper, and in fact, it's impossible to bring the paper to the second round.
Cool. So you're saying from like to be a stronger reviewer, it's about really taking what's there and trying to improve that as much as possible, right? If I guess, assuming that it's possible that the
it does not mean that it's always possible, of course.
Yeah,
that's not what I'm telling, but that's to adopt this perspective at least, and not the perspective, the other one which could be, okay, now I'm going to say everything that should be better done.
Right.
Okay, it's possible to tell it, but it's possibly also to think a bit before about what can be improved and what cannot be improved at this stage, as the manuscript also already exists.
Yeah, so to be constructive, but also reasonable. Yeah. What else? What else makes it for a stronger reviewer?
I think, when you're really looking at reviewing, there's sometimes an impulse when you read the abstract or the introduction of giving what you think about it. Immediately you make that mental frame. And then you want to just justify it in your own mind that, okay, this is what I think about it, and therefore these are the things that a person needs to improve. I really think reviewing should not be done in a one shot, right? It should be done over a period of time. Maybe reading the introduction and abstract first, then reading the second part, then reading the third part, then going back and just making notes. And so it has to be spaced over a period of time, because many times the ideas that the authors may be presenting may be contrary to your own values and understandings, because they may be questioning paradigms. They may be extending the boundaries of what you think is right. Many times they may be criticizing your paper because you may be
that can happen.
right. So I think I would really urge reviewers to when they are, and it's very hard to do this, but the best way to do it is to separate themselves and their own body of work personally, emotionally, when they do reviewing. So if it means that they are questioning your advisor's work, or they're questioning your co-author's work or your work or whatever it is, I think it's very important not to be emotional about the reviews you write. And take your time. I mean, most journals give you 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Right. If you need more time, write to the AE or the editor and say you need a couple of weeks more, because you may do it in a hurry, but you may actually be squashing and destroying. I remember the first time I got as a doctoral student, when I sent in, and I got a horrible review from, I don't want to say which journal, and it was just 7 pages of non-stop destruction. And obviously, because I was challenging certain ideas and philosophies and extending boundaries, and the paper probably was the person who was in that area. So I would think, separate yourself emotionally and be gracious and compassionate, right? Because, when we choose to be an academic, we all make sacrifices. We could all be in corporate, right? That's a career choice we make, right? Most of us are MBAs, or most of us can easily get a job in a corporate and earn maybe 25, 30, 50, 100% more, depending on where you are. So by choosing to be an academic, we are making a sacrifice because we care deeply about our discipline, right? And therefore show compassion and empathy when you do reviewing.
Yeah, I think that's super important. One of the things that I love as advice is I try to like go through and describe what I like about a paper at the start. I think it's always nice to go through and as an author hear that of like, you know, what is good about it before getting into the more critical feedback as well. Yeah, Jean-Luc, did you have something to add as well?
Yeah, by doing so, it's also a way to get immersed in the paper, and you need to be immersed enough in the paper to appreciate what is in the paper, and on the other side to take some distance also to the paper, as Altaf was telling it, not to be emotionally involved too much into the paper, because then you are on the reaction side and you may only see what maybe could have been done in another way according to your own view. And in fact, it's not only your own view which is important. What is important, once again, is how to if in the paper there is something interesting, not to miss it, and to try to co-create with the authors the contribution, the biggest contribution it's possible to make with what has been done. And I would say that means also somehow to be able to identify where and how the authors can be helped in doing that. So also to come up with, not only to say what maybe is not well done, but also to try to say how it could be improved and in which ways, because sometimes there are a couple of ways, a couple of options to improve it. For instance, from a statistical processing point of view, or for some additional studies point of view, or there are different ways to improve it, or from the writing point of view also. And it's important to maybe to give, if when possible, to suggest different options. And of course, the reviewer and the AE does not know exactly the context as the authors know it. So it's better to give them the opportunity to appreciate the different options, and maybe then to leave to them the decision to use the best way they think it is to improve the paper as it has been submitted.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. I love that suggestion, Jean-Luc. You know, when you're critiquing staff or if you see issues with the paper, to go through and basically offer ideas or suggestions of ways that they could solve that, right? But at the same time, be open to letting the authors decide what the best way is to go through and do that.
Yeah, and of course, it's not possible to do it on for one person, for one colleague. It's not important. It's not possible to do it on every point, on every critique, because of course we have right. all our own limits, yeah. But everybody has got some specific area maybe where he or she can help, and if there is the case, then it's really a good idea to give the suggestions, the good suggestions you think which could be used.
Awesome. So to flip then to the other side of this,
I can see it on my small screen, but
your video as well.
I cannot do anything about that. Sorry.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Sorry.
Thanks, Jean-Luc. Yeah. So anything that reviewers then, just to kind of flip to the other side, if we've talked about like what makes a strong reviewer, is there anything or any things that reviewers should avoid doing, right? Like that would be more associated with like a weaker reviewer, or things that people should just not be doing as a reviewer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are several things a reviewer should refrain from, and we've touched upon some themes, you know, in terms of emotionality and in terms of compassion and things like that. But the other thing is, please do not plagiarize. Do not take someone else's idea and embed it into your own research. Do not take someone else's idea and work on it and send it out as your manuscript. I have seen that happen a couple of times. I don't think it is, as reviewers, it is the duty of a reviewer is to enhance the body of knowledge of our peers. It is not an opportunity to look out for for fresh new ideas and make them your own. So it is not a spy game. It's a game of development and mentorship. So that's definitely, don't do it. It's not ethical. It is wrong on several fronts. And I know we have a tendency, because you may be working, it's interesting to see on each topic, everyone, there seem to be so many people working on so many different topics, and so many people working on the same topics from different angles. So please exercise caution that you do not, take an idea which appears to be similar but different from you and then make it your own. So that's definitely something I would encourage reviewers to refrain from. The other thing I would encourage them to refrain from is, sometimes you get manuscripts from across the world, and everyone's not so great in writing, and there is definitely an opportunity for copy editing. There's an opportunity for improvement in language. It is not your job to be the copy editor, and I've seen that. And it comes from the kindness, and it comes from the support and that reviewers have, and many reviewers are very kind to give a lot of their time to really copy edit and give copy edit comments to authors, which is all wonderful, but that's very time consuming, and that's not the role of a reviewer. A reviewer is not a copy editor. So you can obviously say, okay, like for example, in paragraph 1, page 3, it is mentioned this way. It could probably be rephrased, but I would recommend that the authors hire a qualified copy editor to copy edit the manuscript. Definitely say it as a topic of improvement, but don't take it upon yourself to be the copy editor for the authors.
Really good points.
Yeah, maybe just to repeat again that I would say a reviewer should not ask authors to change everything in the MS. They can say that the manuscript has a lot of flaws, and because of that, they recommend to reject the paper, explaining where the flaws are and why the paper should be rejected. And that's, of course, possible. But not to ask, then it's better not to go to the second round, because it's costing for everybody, and nobody is going to be able to bring the paper to a publication. And that's really a pity if that is happening. That's also why I would say, but that's something else. But we need always to keep in mind that probably would be great if we are not going through more than 3 rounds, because it's risky then to arrive to the 3rd round and not being sure that the paper is going to be acceptable.
Yeah.
To reject the paper at the first submission, it's a terrible decision for everybody. So then I would say the reviewers probably need to focus their comments not on the authors, but on the content of the paper. Because, it's a bit different to say this idea should be strengthened, or to say all the authors do not know this or this. According to what they were writing, you cannot infer what they know or what they don't know. And then the comments are too personal and can be not well understood, and that's not a good idea to write to authors too directly, because it's risky. I think it can then happen that some, maybe as Altaf was pointing it before, if there are sometimes good reason to be a bit nervous when you are reviewing a paper against the authors, and then if you are writing in an emotional way the review, some comments can sometimes be or smell a little bit aggressive, and that's not a good idea for anybody. So it's and then something
Definitely.
else but maybe that's a bit a different perspective, but it sounds important to me that the reviewers should not too much focus or too much base their decisions or recommendations on the results and the fact that the hypotheses are supported or not. For me, a paper could be published even when any of the hypotheses is supported. That's not a problem. Of course, if the theoretical part and the theoretical foundations of the hypothesis needs to be strong, and if they are strong and if the methodology is sound, there is no reason for me to reject the paper if all these things are solid. And sometimes it happens that I can see it with colleagues, sometimes not reviewers, but when discussing in an open way, some colleagues sometimes react to the fact that the hypotheses are supported or not. And if the hypotheses are not supported, the conclusion it's too fast to say, oh, there is no contribution. That's, I would say, as soon as a result is produced in a scientific way and solid way, there is a contribution for the how would I say, for building knowledge, for the whole process of
Definitely,
building knowledge.
yeah.
And
Especially if
for
it goes to,
meta-analysis and for literature synthesis and so on.
Yeah, Colin, can I add?
go for it, yeah.
Yeah. So one area I think which we've been discussing a lot of very important, detailed and important topics, but one area I think which warrants some conversation is also the practitioner implications, especially with JAR, because JAR is a bridge between theory and practice, and I absolutely adored this journal, especially because of that. You know, now we don't. It does not mean that it has to be. It has to be completely focused on practitioner problems. It should not only be inspired by practitioner issues. It can be inspired by theoretical gaps in the literature, and that's not what we mean when we say practitioner implications or managerial implications. It's about, are there any lessons there for the practitioner community? Can we enhance the life of an advertising manager or a marketing manager, brand manager, media manager by our research? Is there something that they can learn from? And again, remember, this is an important responsibility of this journal, because it's the beautiful part where we try, and so it's a delicate balance between the theoretical rigor, but also having a few implications which managers can use. And I don't think we are very unique or different from other journals. Journal of Marketing is the same. I mean, Journal of Consumer Research has to have implications for practice. Of course, not for managers, but for practice. So I think in marketing, most journals have this kind of a link with practice, and I think that's an important and valuable service we provide, not only to the academic discipline, but also the practice of marketing, advertising, communication, and media.
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
That's fortunate, yeah, to keep some connections with the practice, because we are dealing with communication, with marketing, and so it should be natural to have practical implications. Yeah, that's part of the discipline, yeah.
Yeah, that's super important. And, as a reviewer, I think it's always important, if you've got ideas on how to strengthen that, to, suggest those as well too, and also be looking at that, especially JAR, that angle as well. One thing I wanted to touch on was how a reviewer might potentially change how they're reviewing if they're looking at a paper that comes back after an author has made revisions, right? is there a slightly different frame, right? How might they be looking at a paper differently than under that when they're looking at it for the first time in the first round?
All right. So again, I'll start off at a very high level. Okay. I think one thing that reviewers need. So what does a reviewer do? Okay. A reviewer reads a manuscript, gives feedback. And I know reviewers put a lot of heart and soul into the reviews, and they give constructive reviews, and they give the review to the editor, and the editor may invite a revision, which is all very good. But once the review comes back, once the manuscript comes back as a revision, I think one important thing the reviewers need to do is keep the ego on the side. Right? And what do I say by that? Don't expect or don't have that mental frame that the authors need to do everything that you tell them to do. I've asked them to do these things. Authors have not done it. Sometimes what may happen is they may do everything, right? You may have a tick mark on everything, but still the contribution may not be there. In fact, the contribution may be worse than what you started. Because remember, a reviewer is like in many ways, it's like these traffic signs, right? Which you want to take your author from its point of origin to its destination, which is the convincing the editor to give it space in the journal, right? So the author is there at one end, the destination is at the other, which is a publication, and a reviewer plays the role of more like a traffic sign. They're directing the authors from its destination to its from its origin to its destination. Now, the reviewer is not the author, right? So the way a reviewer looks at a manuscript, gives suggestions, an author may look at the same thing differently. So what happens in this whole process, right? It's a symbiotic process. The reviewer gives comments, the author takes those comments, interprets those comments, and may use those comments differently in making different changes. What that may mean is they may implement some of the things you're saying. They may go beyond what you're saying. So you may say, your results seem a little weak. I would encourage you to do this test, that test. But then what they may say is, we have gone ahead and collected more data because they see a merit in what you're saying, right? So they may have gone beyond what you're even telling them. Sometimes they may disagree with you. They may say, you say that, but we respectfully disagree because of XYZ reasons. For example, these recent papers which I've mentioned are looking at it from this perspective. So I would recommend reviewers, when the manuscript comes back, to look at it with fresh eyes and a fresh perspective. Yes, you have given them some advice, right? Your advice is not an edict. Your advice is a guidance, which they may interpret and change, adapt, or implement in different ways. So please have an open mind, right? A reviewer does not get, they're not your students, right? Your authors are not your students. So we are used to teaching, and we have a syllabus, and okay, 10% on this and 20% on this, and hey, if you do that, you get a 4.0. Authors are not your students. They will take your feedback. Even students don't listen 100%.
That's true. Yeah.
Right? So they will take your advice, and they will work on it in their own creative process. And that's the whole beautiful process of creativity, of creating knowledge, right? And research is a creative process. So they will take your advice and creatively work on it, and they may do things, they may change things, they may go beyond what you're saying, they may actually refine things. So you keep an open mind, keep your ego on the side. It's not about, I told them to do it and they did not do it, so I'm going to kill their paper. No, it's not a power game. Yeah. It's not a power game. Look at it from a fresh perspective. And with respect.
It's tough as a reviewer, but definitely, I agree with you. You've got to be open. It's just a suggestion, but it's tough when you suggest something and they do something differently. But if it solves the problem, it's okay, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe two additional comments. Never ignoring that that there are also two other reviewers.
Yeah.
So it means, I think one advice is absolutely necessary to read also the other reviews and the answers to the two other reviews, to understand before to evaluate the version 2. Yeah, that's absolutely necessary to take it into account, because if not, it's not. First of all, it's not fair, and then it's not fitting to the philosophy. I would say Altaf was now just describing. And the other thing is probably to take care also, I would say, not to come up with something, with a main issue, a new one.
Yeah.
The reviewer was absolutely not telling, any reviewer was not telling anything about that. And then in the second round, suddenly something which is not new in the second draft was already in the first one. And then the reviewer is starting with something new and something very important or central or key point, key issue. And then, of course, the author is lost.
Yeah, no, that's
because
super
then,
frustrating.
and for the AE, it's terrible then to decide, because then you cannot, I don't feel well if I have to ask something like that in a second round when I know it was already like that in the first one and nobody was telling anything about that.
Yeah, that's super tough. Yeah. No, oh, really good advice, really good points. Thank you. In interest of time, I'm going to jump to our next question, which is, we send out reviews to both academics and also practitioners. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what your differences are in terms of what you're looking for from an academic reviewer versus a practitioner reviewer.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, especially in the context of JAR. So when I look at academic reviewers, I'm really looking at, contribution, methods, gap. Have they, have the reviewers explored that there is a gap in the literature and that the gap has been fulfilled. So I'm looking at, when I'm sending it to an academic review, I'm looking at it from a completely theoretical perspective, right? And with a little bit of, managerial implications. Do they have an appreciation for that? When I'm going for the practitioner, remember, a practitioner is typically, let's look at the profile of people. They're executives, very senior executives in ad agencies, marketing companies. They're not PhDs. Very few are PhDs, very few. But they're not PhDs. They're not trained for academic research the way we do it. They are more, consulting oriented. The perspective is consulting, which is, looking at data, finding solutions, more at the problem as it stands now, rather than looking at a broader perspective. So from their side, I really want to see whether they find the topic important. Is it relevant? Is it contemporary? And whether there are any implications, right? They may have comments about structural modeling should not be done and t-test should be done. All that is great. I would respect that, but for the methods, the theory and all that, I would look at more at the academic reviewers for advice. Whereas the practitioner reviewers is basically, is it a hot topic? Is it something you'd be interested in looking at, talking about, discussing, hearing about, exploring, and whether it really improves your life as a practitioner?
Yeah, maybe just to add a small thing, I would say I fully agree what you said, Altaf. Maybe the practitioner can also be of help in order to appreciate the ecological validity of the findings. Yeah. The way to say, okay, in the methodology, it was done like this and like this and like that, but in fact, we are still very far from a realistic situation, exposure situation, for instance. And maybe it means that he or she can help them to improve a bit the value of the findings, to maybe to limit the value of the findings a bit, and to open also some additional research avenues in order to improve that part, which can also be of value for the author in order to maybe to add a study trying to tackle this issue especially. And maybe
awesome.
sometimes they could also give some ideas to open a way to do it.
That's true. Yeah.
Trying to, maybe they can have an idea of how to do it with the collaboration of a practitioner, for instance, or with data, with existing data or things like that.
Yeah, no, very true. Yeah. So very useful and hopefully helpful for our practitioner reviewers as well too, of like what the things are they're looking to get from them when they review, right? Final question on reviewing is, what are some things that we wish reviewers did more often or did more of? Any sort of like hints or quick tips on things that we'd love them to do more of? One I've got is the comments box. I think that there's always a comments box you can put in comments to the AE and the editors, right? Feel free to use that, and it's a really important one. If you've got things that are critical, you want to give a more critical take, that's a great place to put any sort of comments you've got there that you don't want to send back to the authors, or other concerns you might have as well too. I think for recommendations as well too, I think it's always good practice not to necessarily say exactly what recommendation is in the review, but if you have one, you can put that, of course, in the comments box as well too. But anything else, or?
Yeah, be responsive. So if you have agreed to review, please try and review the manuscript on time. If you need more time, keep the AE or the editor informed that, I'm currently swamped with grading, or I'm having this personal issue or whatever it is, therefore I can't work on it for the next 2 weeks. And that's okay. But please be responsive so that we know, right? Because we have a responsibility to our authors. We can't be, one of the metrics which most journals are monitoring and have improved dramatically is turnaround speed. Yeah. And if we want more authors to send their manuscripts to us, we need to be turning around quickly as well. Because if we are rejecting the manuscript, then we need to give that information to them. Or if we are recommending acceptance or revision or whatever it is, we need to do that fast because of several reasons. We're really talking about the author's careers here, because a month or two here and there can result in a tenure or a promotion, right? So that is that responsibility. The second responsibility is really currency of topic. I mean, there have been certain manuscripts which have taken me 4 years to get it published, right? Round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. By the time it was published, and it was a very topical manuscript, discussing on some national policies, the policies had changed. So it's a different world. The paper got published, so I was happy about that. But hey, it's not current anymore. So there is that responsibility as well. And as you very rightly said, Colin, the comments section, I think that's priceless, because please give your candid comments, and so that we are able to hear what the reviewers are saying without any fear of sharing it with the authors.
Yeah, no, very, very important points. I appreciate that. Yeah, and definitely the turnaround time is something that we aim for as well. We always try to get back, feedback wherever possible to the authors within a month, right? So we definitely, if you can't review or if you're tied up, please let us know as soon as you find that out. Yeah. Jean-Luc, anything to add as well too?
Yeah. I wanted just to say that, first of all, I would like to thank all the reviewers, to tell them, first of all, that they are doing a lot already. We can always say what they should better do, more do, or less do, but they are doing a lot, and that's very important to acknowledge that, and we are really measuring the precious time and efforts they are giving to the journal. And second point, I would say, yes, of course, as soon as possible to the invitation to review, so that we can read quickly, and for the sake of everybody, it's better. And the third point, I would say, is also not to hesitate, not to comment on a part you are not comfortable with. Because, for instance, concerning statistical analysis, you cannot know everything. So if you don't know the the analysis the authors were using, it's better not to comment on that part than to say something because you feel not confident because we don't know it well, and then you say something, another reviewer is going to say exactly the contrary because he knows it well and it works. So it's probably better then to put a note in the comment to the editor just to let him know, okay, I did not say anything on the methodological or this part because I don't feel comfortable with that. And maybe the AE is not waiting for some comment because he was choosing the reviewer for this reviewer for some other part. So it's not a problem at all.
Very much agree. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so as we round out, I wanted to like flag again, if you've got any questions, if you're in the audience, please feel free to throw those in the Q&A box as well. But sort of to round out here, how can we as reviewers be more efficient? What are some tips or tricks or advice you might have on how we can be more efficient as reviewers? Because I'm sure like you, like many people, get lots of reviews to go through and do. Like, what are some things we can do to make that process a little bit, easier or more efficient as a reviewer?
Yeah, don't spread yourself thin, right? Don't overcommit yourself, because I think if you try to do review 6, 7 reviews in a month, you will not be able to do a sufficiently good job on any of them. So firstly, be selective in terms of what you're able to do. Value your time, because as Jean-Luc mentioned, you're doing a lot, and keep that in mind when you're choosing which manuscripts to review. Second thing is, in terms of, mark out a day or a specific time. I do that. I keep, Friday afternoons for reviewing editorial work. Keep a time period where you say, okay, this is the time I'm going to be working on my reviews or editorial work, and maybe, that can be tied in with the work you do on writing and research and things like that. So earmark some time when you do reviewing. And also when you read a manuscript, make sure you make notes, right? Many times you read and after 1 week you may get back and say, oh, wow, I read this part, I don't remember. So make notes, maybe on the manuscript, maybe on the computer, make notes so that you remember what your processing was at that point of time. And so it may the recall may be better as you proceed with reading the manuscript. It may also be very helpful when you start writing your review, because review should not be that, okay, I've spent 2 weeks reading and now I want to write, but you may forget what you read and what you thought when you read. So, make it like an aid to your memory, so that you can, then the whole process becomes quite like a well-oiled machine, because you've done your reading, you've run your comments, and then when you're actually putting it down, you're structuring it all together and compressing it into various sections, which makes sense.
All really good tips.
Yeah, I'm a bit sorry about what I'm going to say, because I would say what I'm going to say is a little bit old-fashioned and maybe not so eco-friendly. But I would say print the manuscript and make notes on the manuscript, with hand notes on the manuscripts. Because when you are reading a manuscript on the computer, you can on the screen, you can never, that's my opinion, of course, only my opinion, but I think you cannot have a good view of the whole structure of the sections and of the paragraph as you would have if you are printing it. And that's why I would say my advice is to print it. Maybe it's a bit old, it doesn't look technologically oriented, but I think it helps to have a better overview of how the paper is written and structured.
I agree. I think that's one of the nice things about printing it as well too, is I can pull off the figures and tables at the end and have those beside me when I'm going through the paper, which I find is a lot easier. Like I use an iPad a lot too when I'm traveling and things like that, but it's hard to flip back and forth, between the paper and the actual like tables and figures as well. So
Yeah, and also it's also always, but that's more for authors, but for reviewers, remembering the reviewers that it's possible according to the GIR guidelines to include the table and the figures exactly already in the manuscript, and of course it helps, can also be an advice for authors.
yeah, that's true. That's a good point as well too. Yeah. Some tips I've got would be to go through, and if you've got, I would keep reviews, at least keep some of like longer reviews. People like, at least I do, that I go through and do, just because sometimes there's common sort of issues that will come up again, almost like giving feedback, not the same for students, but similar, where there might be, issues with certain methodologies or issues with, contributions, things like that, suggestions on that, and having a framework to, use that, and you can edit it and revise it. It can be a bit faster. I also find like having a structure kind of easier, because I know that I'm going to go in, I'll thank them for reviewing the paper. I'll go in and talk about what I like about the paper, and then go into the criticisms, right? I think that can be kind of helpful. That's one tip I've got. And then another one is that sometimes if there's a paper that perhaps there's a fatal flaw to it, or there's some major issues that might be discovered, I think if that's the case, then not to go in, and you don't necessarily have to focus on all the rest of the issues in the paper as well, because it just takes a lot of time as a reviewer. And I think to focus on just maybe the top 3 or 4 can be one way to be more efficient as well too. I find that the ones that are most work are the ones that are really cool ideas, but there's a lot of different, suggestions and stuff, right? Because you want to help the paper as much because you want it to succeed and get out, but those can take more time. Cool, awesome. And we got a question here as well too about some journals moving toward non-anonymous reviews. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I've heard about that as well. I think the process, I don't know as much about it, I have to admit, but I think the way it works is, let me know if I'm wrong, please, the person who asked the question, but is it the reviewers become non-anonymous after the paper is published? Is that right? I would assume that that's the way it goes, or is it, or even during? Interesting, okay. No, that's something that's new to me. Have you heard about that, Alta, for Jean-Luc, or?
No, I've heard that in some other disciplines.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Not in our discipline.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I don't know as much about that, but I'm open to the idea. I think for the moment we're going to stick with our current model. But if you've got a link or something you're open to sharing or sending through, I'd love to read more about that. I'm always curious to learn about potential ways of improving things. Cool. Any other questions or comments from people who are attending? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming, for all people who attended. Thank you. Tremendous thanks to Alta and Jean-Luc as well too for coming and sharing your insight and thoughts with us. This has been super helpful. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you very much, Colin. Thank you very much, JR and ARF.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
And hope it was a bit helpful for everybody.
Very much so. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again. Bye. Yeah.
See you soon. Bye-bye.